This is a special extended web edition of Up Close. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Normally on Up Close, we run short excerpts of our interviews as web video, running the full interviews only on our TV broadcast and in our podcast. For this week, we're airing one of those interviews in full anywhere people can find it. Her story is one of the most shocking examples of an Orthodox woman chained into her marriage, because by the time this interview airs, her husband is scheduled to be married to someone else. Lana Kin is one of the women called agunot, a woman who has not received the Orthodox Jewish divorce document called a get that would officially end her marriage according to Orthodox doctrine, even though she left her marriage 10 years ago and has had a civil divorce since 2007. And now, even though Lana herself does not have the document that would allow her to go on with her life and perhaps date and find a new spouse within the Orthodox community, her ex-husband is marrying another woman. Later in the episode, we'll speak with the author of the book that last month was given the Prose Award for Excellence in Theology and Religion, Moral Evil by Andrew Michael Flescher. But first, Lana Kin told me this was the first time she'd spoken with a journalist about her situation. She was understandably nervous. Here in full is that interview. I'm here with Lana Kin, who is an agunah, or chained woman, stuck in her Orthodox Jewish marriage without an Orthodox Jewish religious divorce document called a get, which means she cannot remarry. But as we speak, your husband is about to remarry. By the time this airs, he will have married somebody else without you being allowed the same privilege, the same opportunity.
Correct.
So how did this happen?
I filed for divorce in 2004, and I found out that there is a get law in New York.
Which is, it's a law that says that if a civil divorce occurs between an Orthodox Jew and between two Orthodox Jews, and that a get must be part of that divorce proceeding. A get must be delivered from the husband to the wife so that the wife can remarry under Orthodox Jewish law.
Correct.
Which is a rare thing in the United States and across the world.
Mm-hmm. My attorney told me at the time that based on the get law, it's better if my ex is the plaintiff. So I basically filed a motion to discontinue. Then my ex filed for divorce, but what he did was he moved to California to circumvent the get law, because there is no get law in California, or we're both from California originally. There is no get law there. There's no get law, as far as I know, in any of the states except New York.
Right, and so you have your civil divorce as of, I believe, 2007.
Correct. Right. From California.
From California. And custody matters and alimony and so forth have all been settled within the civil divorce proceeding.
No. I mean, they have been settled, but they were settled in New York before. He only filed for divorce, nothing else.
Okay. But everything has been settled.
Right, that's
in the sense that you are fully divorced people in every respect regarding American law, in every respect regarding what anyone would recognize as a marriage. The only thing that remains is that, according to Orthodox religious law and custom, he would need to give you a get in order for you to be able to freely marry someone else within the Orthodox world. And he hasn't done that.
Right.
And now he's going to be remarried, and you would still be without one of these gifts.
Right, but you asked me how this happened, how this got this far. What he did was he claims to have deposited a get in escrow with a Rabbi Abraham, a Beis Din that has 3 rabbis on it: Rabbi Abraham, Gestetner, and Blumenkrantz. But this get is a get is supposed to be unconditional. And this get is conditional upon extortion of an extremely high amounts of money. He's asking me for $500,000, and I have to sign an arbitration with these rabbis, an arbitration agreement which would reverse custody. We have one child from this marriage. That's our son Moshe. He's 12 years old now. I would have had to sign an arbitration agreement and lose custody of our son, and I was awarded custody in court.
And I should mention here, by the way, we have reached out to your husband for comment, and he has not responded. We've left voicemails. We have heard nothing from him to respond to everything that you're claiming on the websites set up in your name and in this interview. He has had no comment, and there's documentation suggesting that everything you say is by and large true. And what you're saying right now is that the get, which is simply it's like a pro forma divorce document, the idea that this formally ends the marriage. He hands it to you, it's done, or he hands it to a messenger, and the messenger hands it to you. And then the marriage is dissolved, that this pro forma aspect, which has the ability to keep women chained into a marriage, is being used to reopen, or in the hope on his part of reopening, the entire divorce proceeding that you've already gone through.
Correct.
What does it feel like for you to be in this situation? When did you find out that he was going to be getting remarried?
I found out about a week and a half ago.
So about 2 weeks before the wedding date, you found out, and how did you find out about this? I
heard that he approached one of the Lubavitch rabbis. He was davening in a Chabad shul, and he asked the rabbi to be Masada Kedushin, to officiate at the wedding, and the rabbi looked into the case and said that he could not do that because he understood that Meir Kin did not give me a get. And then that rabbi, I believe, told another rabbi and also a friend of mine, and that's how I found out.
And how did you feel when you found out?
Well, I was really, obviously, very upset because this has been going on for 10 years. I'm in the 10th year without a get. On Hanukkah time, it will be 10 years. And he is doing everything he can to prevent me from having this get. And it's very painful because he can move on with his life. He can date. He's having intimate relationships. He can, he's getting married, which is outrageous.
Married, yeah. Moving on in the most direct sense. Yeah.
That's right. And I am a religious woman. I don't even date. I work and I take care of my children.
Right, and you can't really date because you can't offer to anyone a long-term relationship because there's you according to Orthodox doctrine, you can't get remarried until he gives you this get.
So I don't think it would be fair, and that's why I haven't dated all these years.
For 10 years.
For 10 years.
Yeah. And what is the impact of this on your child?
It's extremely taxing and difficult for our son, and also for my other children. I have 5 children total. I have 4 children from a previous marriage and 1 from this marriage. And I cannot have a normal, I do my best to raise my children and give them love, and I run a real estate company, so I'm a busy person. I show them some semblance of normalcy. I take them on trips. I'm very close with my parents who live in California and with my siblings, one brother that lives in Israel. We go back and forth. I try to keep them close with cousins, but it's not the same. I can't show them what it's like to have a normal, healthy relationship, a normal marriage with a normal, healthy relationship, because for so many years, I raised these children without a husband. And I had to be the man and the woman in the house.
Right, and your situation seems almost uniquely unfair, even within the stories that we've heard of agunot, of women chained into marriages by husbands who are unwilling to give a get. It's quite something else for someone to be saying, yeah, I'm actually going to remarry, and the process by which he's remarrying. This idea of a heter mea rabbanim, an idea that 100 rabbis could sign on to a letter saying that they free him to marry, but that same document doesn't free you to marry. What's up with that?
Well, first of all, I never saw this heter.
Yeah.
I don't know that it exists, but he claims he has one. But the rabbi, this Rabbi Abraham and these other rabbis have a very bad reputation. First of all, and if I would pick up a get that these rabbis are holding, supposedly, which is a conditional one, so it doesn't really have any value, it would be not valid on its face. Regardless, I have documentation to show that no other acceptable Orthodox rabbi will accept the get anyway. In other words, they won't accept their heter mea rabbanan anyway.
Right, it has to be so that the Beit Din that he has reached out to, the rabbinical court that he has reached out to resolve this from his side, is one that appears to be, in the eyes of almost the entire global Orthodox rabbinate, entirely discredited. That this is a rabbinical court that has had letters signed against it, and specifically in the case of your wanting to be dissolved marriage, has had letters signed against it and letters signed against your husband by leading rabbis at Yeshiva University, leading rabbis from the ultra-Orthodox group of Agudath Israel, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Belsky, the chief rabbi of Israel, that there's pretty much uniform disregard for this rabbinical court your husband is trying to use.
Even the rabbis in California, the Rabbinical Court of California.
Right. Universal disregard for the rabbinical court your husband is trying to use, and for your husband, that he has been blacklisted by pretty much every major Orthodox rabbinical group. But he seems to be living an okay life, even within the Orthodox world. He's got a Chabad rabbi. He's got rabbis. He's getting married by someone. He's gotten 100 Orthodox rabbis to sign on to this letter to allow him to remarry.
The rabbis there in Vegas really should not be allowing him to pray in the shuls. They should.
Right. Well, that's actually, according to the signed statements from all these other Orthodox rabbis, among them is do not allow someone like this. This is what's called a siruv, that the idea that that various rabbinical courts can say this person is a recalcitrant husband, this person is not providing a get, and we want this person to not be allowed to be admitted to a synagogue or to read from the Torah or various other things. But your husband is not being uniformly blacklisted. Yeah, and why do you and do you hear from these communities about? Do you have friends in these communities who can tell you what's going on?
He used to be in Los Angeles because his parents are there, his brothers are there, his father is a rabbi in Los Angeles, and his brother is a rabbi in Los Angeles. There was so much pressure put on his family because his family also supports him with this. That's why my case is unique. It's not just him, it's his family as well.
Right, and that is a rarity in the Yaguna situation. Typically, once these things have gone on for a while, a large portion of the husband's family will come around and say, this is inappropriate.
Right.
Yeah, but they have not in this case.
They seem to stand behind him. That's what is so disturbing about this. But that's why the Los Angeles community, demonstrated in front of his parents' house to try to put pressure on them to get him to give me a get.
And what did they say?
And no comment. No, it wasn't effective. But apparently afterwards he moved from Los Angeles to Vegas. So maybe quietly he felt uncomfortable in Los Angeles. And there was a siruv in the community, meaning he was really not supposed to daven in the shuls.
What was this wedding announcement the first that you heard of him being in Las Vegas?
No.
No.
I knew he was in Las Vegas because I send our son for visitation.
Oh, right.
Just because he doesn't give a get doesn't mean I'm not doing the right thing. I still send our son to him.
How often does he go?
He goes for occasionally on holidays, and he'll go for winter break and 3 weeks in the summer.
And what does he say about it? How does he feel about that?
Going there?
Yeah.
I try not to say anything negative about I really am very careful not to say negative things about his father. He doesn't understand the whole story, Moshe, because I don't want to mess up my son. He's a really good kid.
Right. So your husband gets to live a life where everything is okay. He's getting remarried. His son sees him and has no bad thoughts about him. Does your son have any idea about what's going on? Not really. You protect him from it.
I protect him. Maybe that's why he's healthy and normal.
Hopefully he should remain healthy and normal. And to talk about when you initially reached out for community support on this, how that's gone and how that's developed.
Okay. In the beginning, I went to rabbis because that's what I knew I was supposed to do. And I had to go to court. I had a heter to go to court. You're not really supposed to go to the non-Jewish courts.
Right. Generally in the Orthodox and certainly in the ultra-Orthodox community, the court of first order will be a rabbinical court, that you wouldn't go to a U.S. court for resolving a divorce. But in this case, you're saying you reached out to a rabbi first.
I reached out to a rabbi, and he was very difficult. My ex-husband was a very controlling person, needless to say, obviously 10 years without a get. and very mean to my children, my other children from my previous marriage. It was very hard to work with him. And I asked a rabbi what I should do and how I should handle this, and I had to go to court because of some of the things that he did. I had no choice. So I had a document called a heter arkos, which allowed me to. And afterwards, you asked how I got, your question was what, how I got the community involved. Someone told, one of my friends mentioned Aura to me.
Which is the Organization for the Resolution of Agunot, which was only formed a few years ago. You've been stuck in this.
I've been in this since 2004. I got involved with Aura in I think 2005 or 6. So that must have just started at that time, I guess.
And what has been the community work on your behalf, and how have you responded to it?
The people at Aura were, I mean, they've been extremely helpful. They really take things into their own, they advocate for the person who was an aguna. They call rabbis and they do demonstrations. I sort of put it in their hands. It's not a direct thing from me. It's and what has there been? Have you felt a feeling of support? Have you felt a feeling of support from the people at Aura and from friends of mine? But really, there's a problem, I think, in the community. I don't think people really are very sensitive to this aguna problem.
Right.
I think. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No,
go ahead.
Well, no, I thought it was interesting. Before we started shooting this interview, you were asking me almost why are you here, in the sense of like why is this something that the Jewish channel cares about? And I had to explain to you why we think this is newsworthy and important for our audience. Is your sense that most of the community doesn't want to pay attention to this?
Yes. I think that in the Orthodox community, many people think that if someone gets divorced, that they just don't know how to handle a relationship. They don't understand the depth of abusive relationships, controlling relationships, and all those interdynamics. And I think people should be more educated. I think that would be one thing. That's why I'm here. I came here because I think I kept this quiet for years. I didn't go on television. But
well, this is 10 years later.
10 years later. I mean, this is outrageous what's happening. And if this, what happens, because of my situation, there are people who come to me if their daughters are having a problem, or people I know hear about me and they talk to me and they ask how they can, if there are women who are trying to get a get or having problems with their marriage, sometimes they come to me. And what I find is a lot of people, a big part about this get problem is the extortion aspect of it. And
right. If a man has the ability to not end a divorce by simply, it doesn't cost him anything to create a get, and so it's very easy for him to make it cost you something, or any woman to make it cost them something in a marriage like this.
So there are a lot of situations that nobody ever hears about where basically the woman or her family or friends of the family pay off these men. The other men are extorting their wives too for money, I don't know, I'm sure custody, I'm sure other things.
Right, the larger aguna issue that we hear about relates to perhaps dozens of women in a long-term situation. But you almost never hear about someone who, it's just a 2-3 month situation, and ultimately a 5-figure or 6-figure sum ends up being what resolves that. Or even just the idea that knowing that a husband can hold this over a woman's head, that the divorce simply is imbalanced to begin with. How do you feel about that, and as you speak with more women about that?
It's my understanding that the get was actually created, the document of the get was created for the benefit of women initially, many, many years ago.
Okay, that's an interpretation.
It's interpretation.
You know, but
because women didn't have jobs the way they do today, they weren't income producing, and they needed to be married to the husband, so the husband needed the wife's permission in order to get divorced.
Right, there is another side of this, that in theory a woman could refuse a get. So in one sense she's empowered to go for a better divorce settlement. If she doesn't accept the get, then the husband has to essentially up his offer.
Or she wouldn't be thrown on the street years ago when there was no chance of her having an income.
Right, and there are an extreme minority of these kinds of cases of unresolved marriages where women have refused to get. But in this case, this isn't a question of you're not lobbying for more support. You've gotten your support, you've gotten your custody settled by a civil court. You're just asking for this document so that you can go on with your life.
That's right. And that's what's so controlling and sick about this.
And the fact that this other document exists that's allowing him to remarry, does it seem to you that the same document that allows him to remarry should allow you to remarry? Does it seem to you that at this stage that there simply has to be a better resolution to this kind of problem?
It's a very logical question and a good question. And yes, I feel there should be a document for women to allow them to remarry. But this document that he has is not from rabbis that are accepted.
Well, the document, yeah, I mean, certainly, and to the degree that, almost every major Orthodox rabbi in the world has at this point signed a document against your husband. I don't believe that this document that he has will be accepted by a great many Orthodox rabbis. But the idea that the entire Orthodox rabbinate is essentially coming to you and saying, we have no solution for you.
That is extremely perturbing, to say the least. And I have heard of cases like this where they have annulled the marriage.
Right, that they would go back and look at the wedding documents and find that one of the witnesses was invalid, because if it's an Orthodox religious document, the witnesses need to have adhered to Orthodox Jewish law in its great minutia, and if they can find out that some guy used an electronic hotel room key on a business trip on Shabbos, then they can say, well, this marriage never existed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a very rarely used technique, and in fact, there was a group of Orthodox rabbis that embraced it some decades ago, and Orthodox rabbis ultimately rejected it, pretty much in their entirety.
They need to do something. If a man can remarry, I don't know of another case that has gone this far.
I've heard it said that if this aguna problem, if this problem of being stuck in marriages was a problem that redounded to men, was a problem where men felt they had no freedom, that this would not be a problem because the Orthodox rabbis are men, and they simply wouldn't allow this to go on. Do you feel that way?
I never thought of it in those terms, but it could be. It is a good point, and women might be more tolerant in general by nature. But
how does this make you feel, this overall situation, about yourself in the Orthodox community, about the Orthodox community overall, and about perhaps the Jewish community overall? This is a community in which you spent your entire life, and now its strictures have put you in a situation that is simply without options and simply without choices for how to go forward with your life. Does it make you feel, I can think a lot of people, I imagine, would shun Orthodox Judaism in an experience like this after 10 years.
And there are people who do. The thing is that I have an extremely strong, solid foundation. I believe very strongly in God, and I believe in the Torah, and I believe as I was growing up, my father always taught me the Torah is perfect, but people are not. I think there's something wrong with the way the rabbis are handling this and the community is handling it. I'm in this. If I was going to rebel, I would just be dating and doing whatever I wanted. But because of my conviction, because of my dedication to Judaism and the Torah, I am staying the way I am. Sure, I'm upset. I think we have to do something else. I think there should be enough people who are. I think people should talk to the rabbis, and the rabbis should do something about this and not just ignore it like they have been.
So what do you want to happen?
I want them to either change the laws. They can do it. Or also, there is this. Some of the rabbis came up with this prenuptial agreement for a get.
Right, right.
I think that's excellent. I advocate for that. I even have spoken at the colleges, at Stern College.
Right, that's the Rabbinical Council of America has this document that that basically says the parties agree to certain conditions should there be a divorce, which more or less compels a get as part of the first aspects of a divorce proceeding. And in fact, you know, you were speaking about the Organization for the Resolution of Agronot, and the Rabbi Jeremy Stern. I was speaking with him a few weeks ago, and he said that as far as he's concerned, and as far as many Orthodox rabbis are concerned, there's no reason why the get can't be the first thing in a divorce. That I think there's a lot of confusion around divorce procedures because almost none of us go through a divorce. Until we do, until some of us do. But there's a common conception, I would say, certainly it was my conception at some point, that the get needs to be the final part of a divorce, that you need to get everything done and then have the divorce. But as far as his position was that once a divorce is happening, that once it's clear that this marriage is not going to be resumed, the get is simply a pro forma part of it that can be delivered at any point. And as far as he's concerned, and as far as some rabbis are concerned, it should really be the first part of a divorce.
I agree with them. I think that every Orthodox rabbi should not be allowed to officiate at any wedding, any Orthodox Jewish wedding, unless he makes this prenuptial agreement for a get a condition of the marriage.
All right. Well, do you have any last message for our viewers, for the broader Jewish community?
I think that people should, I think that actually this prenuptial agreement is a very important document. I think people should be aware of this. I think that this involves our sisters, our daughters. I think that more people should be aware of this Aguna situation, and they should try to do something about it.
Right, and that prenuptial agreement is something that would help avoid this problem in the future. I think the question is, what can the community do now for you and for others?
And others in my position, I don't know if it's a message I want to give. Basically, I think that the rabbi should reevaluate and figure out, just like they figured out loopholes 10 years ago. You mentioned those rabbis that figured out some loopholes and were going to annul the marriages. They should figure out some way to do that again now, instead of just everyone brushing this under a rug. This is something that's very serious, a very serious problem. And the more that these controlling men try to extort their wives for a get, and if they're rewarded and they do receive that, they receive money or whatever they're trying to get, then more hear about it, and it's just going to escalate. The problem is just going to escalate if nothing's done about it.
All right, well, that's a very strong warning. Lana Kin, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on, why do bad things happen to good people, and why do bad things happen at all? Andrew Michael Flescher probes these questions in his award-winning book, Moral Evil. Your book is a kind of a guided tour through the various ideas we've had about evil. The basic question of why do people do bad things? And why do they?
The answer to which I ultimately come is because they don't do enough good things. So the book is really about the consequences of human inaction, subtle but far-reaching havoc that's wrought when we don't do the kinds of things repetitively that we should be doing to be better.
It's not that that there is some external calling to be evil, but simply that the major primary needs of food, shelter, and I think companion. What's the third one? I forget. But that in seeking these things, we all know we need these things to survive, and then we can choose to acquire more and more of these things and run over other people in the process. But if we're going to be other than evil, then we need to have moments to stop and think.
The example to which I liken this in the Catholic tradition is the AA. Well, not just the Catholic tradition, but that fourth step of the 12 steps, moral inventory, which is what I think
Alcoholics
Anonymous, right. Moral inventory, always re-examining oneself. I talk about a pedestrian example of, driving to work to make an important meeting or teach a class in my case. And we've had a bad winter, so there's a lot of people shoveling their driveways. So
Right.
you've seen elderly couples shoveling their driveway. It's not practical to stop and help. You have to live your life and not take leave of your senses and be responsible for your commitments. But how do you feel on the way to work? I mean, how do you think about, sometimes you're choosing between relatively tragic options. Do you become a little bit different? Or can you try to be a little bit more creative to try to, satisfy both prongs of the dilemma?
Right, and when we consider the major ideas of evil in the world and why bad things happen and why bad things happen to good people and why seemingly good people do bad things, we have a lot of history to look at, and particularly in the Jewish community. I think we look at historical examples for ideas of what are evil. And one of the things that's interesting about your presentation is that as you go through all the various ideas of evil, there's kind of a cyclical effect, that ideas are picked up and dropped throughout history, and we kind of keep going back to the Bible in some senses, and adding new twists.
So the concept you just referred to is theodicy, which is the project of trying to justify how could there be terrible things in light of the supposition of an all-loving, all-powerful God. It's actually the second model I discuss in the book. So that would be evil really leading to good, but we just lack the panoramic perspective from which to see all angles, either at the end of the day or at the end of the month or at the end of the year or in the next life, all wrongs will be made right. But I think that issue, for precisely the historical reasons to which you refer, ultimately has some problems. I think there's a threshold beyond which, when certain things happen, you can no longer say to the victim, and only the victim shares the victim's perspective, that this terrible thing that just happened to you will be made right somewhere down the line. But that is the traditional view.
The idea of identifying with victims of evil is something that again you bring up through the Jewish tradition. At a couple of points you quote Emmanuel Levinas speaking about how we need to understand, how if we're going to really understand what someone's going through, we can't dismiss it with something as simple as theodicy, as simple as the idea of it's all part of God's plan.
Levinas says that, and actually an evangelical Christian, C.S. Lewis, says that. When he lost his wife, Joy Davidman, he wasn't in love, and then in his 50s he fell madly in love. And I think the best treatise on grief ever written, A Grief Observed, is about him coping with the loss of his wife. And a good friend of his who shares his faith came to him and said, "Look, God's ways are mysterious," and he slams his hand down, as it's depicted in the movie Shadowlands by Anthony Hopkins, and says, "No, religion is not going to console me in this way." Elie Wiesel said after the Holocaust, "I can be with God and I can be against God, but I can't be without God." Both C.S. Lewis and Elie Wiesel actually retain that traditional attitude of theodicy. I don't think that's the main question for people thinking about the problem of evil anymore. I think the main question now is they sort of leave to the side that which is to be determined a mystery, and say, how do we cope? How do we forge solidarity? How do we build connection? What can we do? The thing that motivated me to write the book, there are a couple instances that hit the headlines in New York, but so many examples where human beings are absolutely in the clear if they don't do the thing in question they could do. Legally, they're in the clear. They've fulfilled their minimum moral requirement.
That our society doesn't have laws to legislate
right. No
morality.
Good Samaritan
It
laws,
has, yeah.
like is jokingly experimented with at the end of the last Seinfeld episode. But that nevertheless, when we don't do them, we sort of become worse than we were before.
That's all for this week's abbreviated web episode of Up Close. A reminder, you can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable, or listen to the full audio of the show as a podcast available on iTunes and your favorite podcast player. Jewish channel is available on cable: Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.